How will this Passover be different from all other Passovers? On all other Passovers, we celebrate our people's freedom from Egyptian bondage. In 5784, we ask, how can we celebrate while Israeli hostages are still being held captive by terrorists in Gaza? On all other Passovers, we reduce our cups of joy by 10 drops for the plagues upon Egypt. In 5784, we count all the ways our cups are diminished. Over 1,200 killed by terrorists. 600 plus citizen soldiers killed and many more wounded in battle. Over 100,000 Israelis driven from their homes. Tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians killed in Gaza, with survivors suffering famine, an unfathomable humanitarian crisis. On all other Passovers, maror, bitter herb, symbolizes long ago suffering, and salt water represents tears shed by our ancestors. In 5784, the bitterness is in the news every single day, and the tears are from our own eyes. On all other Passovers, we are encouraged to recline at the Seder. In 5784, we will be at the edge of our seats, frightful about when and where the next bomb will drop, literally. When I lead a Seder, I'm pretty faithful to the HaGadol. Yes, I pick and choose and we skip. I'm not one to keep my guests past midnight. I typically disregard Seder supplements, documents distributed by Jewish organizations, enabling us to keep the Seder relevant, responding to present-day situations in which God's children are suffering and in need of redemption. I do find ways of doing that at Seder each year, often through questions, and I'll do that again in my own way at home and at our congregational Seder. This year, though, I also need a Seder supplement. We all do, which is why we distributed one in Wednesday's Temple E-Blast. We cannot celebrate our freedom without acknowledging people who are not free, this year, including our own people. Thankfully, skilled liturgists and poets have prepared prayers, readings, and rituals to bring the hostages and all who are suffering to our Seder tables. I'm reminded of the Anne Frank tree at the Clinton Center, which memorializes not only the Holocaust, but Arkansas injustices too, the Indian Removal Act, Japanese internment, and the Little Rock Nine. At the dedication, the temple leader asked me, isn't the Holocaust enough? The answer, of course, is yes, and for Passover, the Exodus is enough. The Anne Frank Foundation, though, imposed a condition of giving us the tree. We had to include local oppression. The foundation was right. If we live in a world where people are enslaved, whatever form that slavery takes, and we do live in such a world, then Passover can not only be a celebration, it must also rouse us to action on behalf of those who remain in bondage. If people face discrimination, hatred, and oppression because of who they are, particularly, but not only if that's because they're Jewish, then our Holocaust remembrance must both honor victims and call us to action. Among the many horrific images of October 7th, the one that terrorized me most was that of an elderly woman whisked off to Gaza in the clutches of her terrorist captors. What would become of her and the dozens of others taken hostage? More than 6 months have passed since Hamas and other terrorists took over 250 hostages, Israeli Jews, Bedouins, and foreign guest workers among them. More than 100 were released during a brief ceasefire at the end of November. Yesterday, NBC reported that Israel says that more than 130 hostages remain and about a quarter of those are believed dead. That same report confessed that it remains unclear exactly how many of the captives are still alive in Gaza. And the uncertainty has caused anguish among the families of the hostages and undermined international efforts to negotiate a ceasefire deal and the release of at least some of the hostages. A proposed ceasefire formula calls for Hamas to free 40 hostages who are women, children, or sick and elderly men. But Hamas has so far been able to confirm that it has identified 40 hostages who meet that criteria. Terrifying. Our Israeli Reform movement has consistently insisted that freeing the hostages must be Israel's top priority in this moment. Israeli Reform rabbis have taught the traditional texts to back up that priority, including the words of Maimonides, "We have no greater mitzvah, no greater religious obligation than freeing captives." Alongside tens of thousands of others, hostage families and Israeli Reform movement leaders have taken to the streets every Saturday night, week after week, to demand that the government place freeing hostages at the top of its agenda. They are very skeptical. President Biden has demonstrated infinitely more concern for hostage release than has Prime Minister Netanyahu. For example, meeting with hostage families sooner and more frequently, and speaking of their plight regularly. That concern is bipartisan in the United States and ought not be controversial in Israel. But hostage families have increasingly felt compelled to join protests calling for new elections, for a government that will seek hostages' freedom, a call now officially joined by the Israel Movement for Progressive Judaism. My friend, Rabbi Oded Mazor, spoke last month about what the day after would mean to him and members of his community, Congregation Kol Hanshama in Jerusalem. Here's an excerpt. Thinking about the day after, I'm thinking about the manager of Kol Hanshama, Anna. Her cousin is Karina Arayev. She's one of the women soldiers kidnapped from the Nahal Oz base on October 7th. For many weeks, awful weeks, Anna's uncle and aunt, Karina's parents, and the whole family, which is a rather small family of Ukrainian Jews, didn't know anything about Karina and her situation. 3 weeks ago, Hamas released a short film with 3 women talking. One of them was Karina. That's the first time they received any message, if we can call it that. What Anna is thinking about Hayom Acharei, the day after. There is no Yom Acharei. There is no day after without Karina coming home. Karina's parents, Anna's aunt and uncle, told her that explicitly. If she doesn't come home, there is no day after. We try as a community to be there with Anna and her family the whole time through. When we say the whole time through, it means that weeks ago, too many weeks ago, when the first groups of hostages were released, every time a group of hostages came back home and Karina was not amongst them, we were rejoicing with the families who received their loved ones back home, but we were in pain with Anna's family, with Karina's family, and the families of all the hostages who are still waiting and have no idea, and had no idea until the first group of people came off that Hamas vehicle, and still have no idea. They still have no idea. But that does not mean that they do not have hope, nor may we lose hope. We will open the door for Elijah and to the possibility of a better day ahead, opening the door to our responsibility to be God's partners in making it so. We must keep the hostages' plight at the forefront of American leaders' agenda, urging them to continue calling on the Israeli government to do the same. October 7 was Shabbat and Atzeret Simchat Torah, the day every year when we begin praising God as Mashiv Haruach Umorid HaGashem, the one who causes wind to blow and the rain to fall. This Shabbat is the last when we will utter those words for this year. Israel's rainy season, which began when the hostages were taken, has come to an end. At Passover, we celebrate new beginnings for the natural world and for our people liberated from Egyptian bondage. We turn to Song of Songs, the Bible's springtime love poetry. Most years, we do so in celebration of renewal. This year, we sing these words as a prayer. Kumilach, let the winter of war and destruction and captivity end. Let springtime bring new life. Arise, our beloved hostages. Arise and come away. Come home to freedom, to new life, to peace. Amen.